There's a specific kind of silence that happens right before disaster. It is the quiet moment before the trap snaps shut. For me, that moment happened under the bright crystal chandeliers of the Grand Palace Hotel ballroom. It was the night of Omnicore Systems' annual gala. This was the biggest night in the history of the company I helped build. Tonight, a $150 million contract with Titan Retail was supposed to be signed. This deal would put our company on the global map. I adjusted my tie and walked up to the heavy glass entrance, ready to celebrate with my team. Instead, two large security guards stepped into my path. They crossed their arms, blocking the doorway. I paused, assuming it was a simple mistake. I reached into my jacket to pull out my executive VIP pass. Before I could present it, a man stepped out from the warm, laughing crowd inside the ballroom. It was Julian Ross. He was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo and holding a glass of expensive champagne. Julian was the new CEO. He had been brought in 18 months ago by the private equity firm that now held a majority stake in Omnicore. Julian had a smug, practiced smile on his face that instantly made my stomach turn. He looked at the guards, then turned his eyes to me. He did not speak quietly. In fact, he raised his voice just enough so that the board members and my own junior engineering staff standing nearby would hear every single word. "I am sorry, Marcus," Julian said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "But your VIP credentials have been revoked. Your presence inside the ballroom is no longer required tonight." I stood perfectly still. The lobby felt completely freezing. "What are you talking about, Julian?" "I am the chief enterprise architect. I co-founded this company. The Titan Retail contract is based entirely on my logistics platform." Julian let out a short, condescending laugh. He took a slow sip of his champagne and stepped closer, making sure his audience could see his total dominance. "Let's be honest with ourselves, Marcus," Julian said, his tone turning sharp and arrogant. "The company has evolved. We are a massive enterprise now. The era of backroom code monkeys running the show is officially over. We need modern corporate leaders to represent this brand to international clients like Titan Retail." "You look tired, Marcus. You do not fit the image we are projecting tonight. Go home. We will handle the heavy lifting from here." The board members did not say a word. They just watched, some of them nodding in agreement with Julian. My junior staff looked down at the floor, too terrified for their own jobs to speak up. It was a calculated, brutal public execution of my professional reputation. Julian wanted to show everyone in that room that I was completely powerless. He wanted to erase my name from the company's greatest victory. If Julian expected me to yell, argue, or beg, he did not know me at all. As a system architect, my entire life is built on emotional control and logical analysis. When you face a system error, you do not scream at the monitor. You find a root cause, and you fix it. I looked Julian directly in the eye. I did not raise my voice. I did not let my hand shake. I calmly unclipped my executive badge from my jacket. I stepped forward and dropped the piece of plastic directly into Julian's open hand. "Enjoy the night, Julian," I said softly. I turned around and walked out of the hotel lobby. I pushed through the heavy revolving doors and walked out into the cold, pouring rain. The water soaked through my suit jacket within seconds, but I barely felt it. As I walked down the stone steps toward the parking lot, the burning anger inside me turned into a cold, sharp clarity. Julian thought he had just won the ultimate power move. He thought he had successfully kicked a quiet tech guy out of his own castle. But in his desperate rush to humiliate me and take full credit for the Titan Retail deal, Julian had committed a catastrophic, fatal error. He had spent months presenting my data architecture to the board as if he had created it himself. He had spent months treating me like a simple employee who could be thrown away. But in his complete ignorance of how our technology actually worked, Julian had forgotten one crucial detail. He had completely forgotten who actually legally owned the foundational software platform that the entire company relied on to survive. He thought he owned the kingdom, but he didn't realize I held the keys to the foundation. I sat inside my car, the windshield wipers pushing the heavy rain away in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. The dashboard lights cast a faint blue glow over my hands. I looked back at the Grand Hotel, its windows glowing with warmth and celebration. I could still hear the faint bass of the music from the ballroom. 10 years. I had spent 10 long years of my life building Omnicore systems from absolutely nothing. I remember the early days clearly. I was 32 when my original partner and I started the company in a cramped, freezing garage workshop. We lived on cold coffee, cheap noodles, and an obsession with solving a massive problem in enterprise logistics. I spent 18 hours a day writing the core code. I built the data pipelines that allowed massive retail companies to track millions of shipments in real time without a single glitch. I sacrificed my weekends, my sleep, and my personal life to ensure Omnicore became a technical masterpiece. Then, 2 years ago, our rapid growth caught the attention of Wall Street. A powerful private equity firm offered a massive investment to help us scale globally. It seemed like a dream come true at the time. But with their millions came strings attached. They demanded corporate restructuring. They wanted a polished frontman who could speak the language of institutional investors. That frontman was Julian Ross. Julian arrived with an Ivy League degree, perfect teeth, and zero understanding of how data actually moves across a network. To Julian, technology was just a collection of buzzwords he could use in PowerPoint presentations to impress board members. He immediately viewed me as a threat. Why? Because I actually understood the business. I knew the operational reality, and I refused to let him lie to our clients about our system's capabilities. Julian began a silent, systematic war against me. First, he reassigned my core engineering team to different departments, replacing them with expensive consultants who only knew how to agree with him. Then, he slowly pushed me out of critical executive strategy meetings. He even ordered the marketing team to rewrite the company website, removing my name from the history page and painting himself as the sole visionary behind Omnicore's success. Tonight's gala was supposed to be my moment of vindication. The Titan Retail deal was the direct result of my platform's flawless performance during a 3-month trial run. But Julian couldn't risk me standing on that stage. He needed to completely erase me to solidify his own power before the Titan executives signed a final contract tomorrow night. He chose the most public, humiliating way possible to break my spirit. Julian believed the common corporate myth that technical founders are soft, passive, and easily bullied. He thought because I didn't shout in meetings or play political games, I would just accept my fate, take a small payout, and disappear quietly into the background. But Julian made a massive mistake by treating me like a standard corporate politician. I am an engineer. I do not play games with words. I build systems. And a fundamental rule of engineering is that you always build redundancy. You always create a backup plan. Throughout my entire career, I have documented every single transaction, every line of code, every email, and every minor corporate shift. As I shifted my car into drive and pulled out of the parking lot, a cold smile formed on my face. Julian's public insult wasn't just a personal betrayal. By officially revoking my executive status and barring me from my corporate duties in front of witnesses, Julian had just crossed a legal red line. He had no idea that his arrogant display at the door had just triggered a hidden operational mechanism that would bring his entire empire crashing down. I drove through the quiet streets and arrived at my house just after midnight. The house was dark, but my mind was completely bright with focus. I did not go to bed. I did not take off my damp suit jacket. I walked straight into my home office, a room filled with 3 large monitors and a private, off-grid server tower that I built with my own hands. I pressed the power button, and the screens cast a sharp white light across my face. To Julian and the private equity firm, this office was just a hobby room for an old tech guy. To me, it was the vault where the true history of Omnicore systems was kept. I opened a heavily encrypted folder and pulled up 2 documents. The first was the original corporate bylaws from 10 years ago. The second was a proprietary software lease agreement. Most people do not understand how tech companies are built. When the private equity firm invested millions into Omnicore 2 years ago, they believed they were buying everything. They bought the office building, the brand name, the client lists, and the computers. They even bought the basic software applications, but they did not by the core data routing protocol. That protocol is called OmniRoute. It is the invisible digital engine that allows our system to process millions of retail transactions every single second without crashing. It is the entire reason OmniCore is successful. I invented OmniRoute before the company even had a name. It is patented under my personal name, Marcus Vance. When the investors came in, their lawyers tried to force me to transfer the patent to the company. I firmly refused. Instead, my original partner and I signed a very specific, ironclad software lease agreement. Under that agreement, OmniCore was allowed to use OmniRoute for a very small fee, but there was a massive condition. The lease was directly tied to my active employment. The contract explicitly states that if I am fired, demoted, or blocked from performing my executive duties as chief enterprise architect, the lease is automatically breached. If a breach occurs, OmniCore's legal right to use my proprietary engine terminates instantly. Julian Ross has an Ivy League master's degree in business, but he has a massive weakness. He considers technical addendums and legal contracts to be boring details. He never actually read the founding software leases because he assumed the company owned everything. He thought a founder was just an employee he could bully and replace. This brought me to the upcoming Titan Retail contract. Titan Retail is a global giant. They did not take risks with customer data. Their legal team spent 3 months auditing our system before agreeing to the $150 million deal. In that contract, which Julian is scheduled to sign tomorrow night, Titan Retail explicitly mandates absolute compliance with my patented OmniRoute architecture. Their security insurance completely depends on it. By publicly barring me from my corporate duties tonight, by telling me my presence was no longer required in front of the board and my staff, Julian didn't just hurt my feelings. He officially triggered a material breach of the foundational lease agreement. I looked at the digital contract on my screen. The logic was completely flawless. Because Julian chose to humiliate me tonight, OmniCore Systems is currently running on legally unauthorized technology. The entire network is operating illegally. The very platform that Julian is planning to sell to Titan Retail tomorrow night does not belong to OmniCore anymore. It belongs entirely to me. Julian thought he was throwing me out of his party, but he didn't realize he was standing in a house that I legally owned. I leaned back in my chair, watched the green lines of code flash across my monitor, and began to prepare my next move. For the next 24 hours, I did not leave my home office. I operated in absolute, icy silence. When you're planning a corporate comeback, your greatest enemy is your own mouth. Loud people give away their plans. Angry people make mistakes. I did not call Julian. I did not email HR. I did not post a single word on LinkedIn about what happened at the gala. I let Julian believe that I was at home, defeated, packing my bags, and feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I spent every hour loading my legal weapon. I compiled a decade of system logs, intellectual property registrations, and the signed corporate lease agreements into one single, bulletproof file. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I called an elite corporate attorney named Robert Vance, who also happens to be my cousin. Robert is a senior partner at a major law firm that specializes in intellectual property theft. I sent him a file. 30 minutes later, Robert called me back. His voice was filled with absolute disbelief. "Marcus," Robert said, letting out a low whistle. "Julian Ross is an idiot. He has no idea what he just did. This isn't just a breach of contract. By forcing you out while actively using your proprietary system to secure a massive client, he has exposed the entire company to total ruin. You hold absolute legal leverage here." "I know," I replied calmly, "but I need more than just a lease agreement. I need proof of intent. To get that proof, I used my private server to look at the internal network logs. What I found was a gift. Just 3 hours before the gala started, Julian had sent an urgent, confidential email to the head of the IT department. In the email, Julian explicitly ordered IT to secretly restrict my administrative access to the main servers, effective immediately, without notifying me. He wrote, and I quote, "We need to neutralize Vance before the Titan contract is finalized, so he cannot interfere with the transition of power. It was a perfect paper trail of internal corporate sabotage. Julian had put his criminal intent into writing on a company server, completely forgetting that I built the log recovery systems that capture every deleted file. But as I dug deeper into the system architecture, I discovered an even more devastating lever. It was something far bigger than a lawsuit. It was a ticking clock. Omnicore's entire security system relies on a high-level cryptographic rotation. Every 90 days, the enterprise platform requires a manual security update to renew its encryption tokens. If these tokens are not authorized, the system automatically assumes it is under a massive cyber attack. To protect consumer data, the platform enters an immediate, automated lockdown mode, freezing all data routing globally. The expiration date for the current quarter's keys was exactly 48 hours away. And because I designed the security system to prevent external hacking, the renewal process requires a unique biometric signature. It requires my personal fingerprint and a private master password that only exists in my memory. Julian was completely blind to this reality. He had spent his entire career in offices where assistants handled the details, so he believed that software just ran by itself forever. He truly believed he had successfully neutralized me and cleared his path to a multi-million-dollar bonus. He had no idea that while he was preparing to celebrate his big signing ceremony, the countdown clock on his entire career was already ticking down to zero. I saved the IT logs, closed my laptop, and waited for the morning light. The next morning, the corporate machine kept moving as if nothing had happened. At exactly 9 o'clock, my personal phone buzzed with an automated notification. Julian had called an emergency, company-wide town hall meeting. The description on the calendar invitation read, "Celebrating our next chapter in the Titan Retail Partnership." I sat in my quiet home office wearing a simple t-shirt and drinking a cup of hot black coffee, and clicked the live stream link on my monitor. The video feed opened on the grand auditorium at our corporate headquarters. Julian stood directly in the center of the stage, bathed in bright, expensive studio lighting. A massive digital banner hung on the wall behind him, proudly displaying the Omnicore logo right next to Titan Retail's branding. The room was packed to maximum capacity with hundreds of employees, local business reporters, and the entire board of directors sitting in the very front row. Julian was in his absolute element. He paced across the stage with boundless, practiced energy, using dramatic hand gestures. He began his speech by detailing the incredible financial growth of the company over the last 12 months. But as the minutes went on, his true agenda became painfully obvious to anyone who actually knew the truth. He systematically took complete personal credit for every single technical milestone we had reached. He spoke about the complex data pipelines and the global logistics architecture as if he had spent sleepless nights writing the code himself. Then, he decided to take a subtle, public jab at me. To build a truly global enterprise, Julian told the crowd, flashing his bright white smile, a company has to outgrow its past. Some people are brilliant at starting a small project in a garage. They're good with basic tools, but they do not possess the high-level strategic vision required to scale that project into a multi-million-dollar empire. The old guard gets comfortable. They fear change. They hide behind technical jargon because they simply cannot handle the fast-paced, aggressive reality of modern business operations. A few private equity board members sitting in the front row smiled and nodded their heads in agreement. It was sickening to watch, but I kept my emotions perfectly flat. He was rewriting history in front of the entire company, turning the man who built the foundation into an irrelevant relic of the past. Then came the ultimate corporate lie. Julian paused, adopting a solemn, practiced expression of regret. As we transition into this massive partnership with Titan Retail, our chief enterprise architect, Marcus Vance, has chosen to step down from his position to pursue personal interests. We thank Marcus for his early contributions, and we wish him the best in his future endeavors. The room erupted into loud, thunderous applause. The board members stood up for a standing ovation. My junior engineers looked completely confused, but they clapped anyway out of fear for their own jobs. Julian stood there, soaking in the unearned praise, looking like a king who had just conquered a rival kingdom. He truly believed he had won. He believed that by creating a public narrative, he had forced me into a corner where I would have no choice but to accept my defeat quietly. An hour after the meeting ended, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct text message from Julian's private number. It was short, cold, and incredibly condescending. "Marcus, I hope you watched the town hall. The transition has already been announced to the public, and the board is fully aligned with my leadership. Let's handle your exit cleanly. Attached is a severance package for $200,000. It includes a standard, strict non-disclosure agreement. Sign it by 5 o'clock today, and we can keep this friendly. If you refuse, I will have HR terminate you for cause, and you will leave with absolutely nothing. Choose wisely." $200,000. It was an absolute joke. It was a microscopic fraction of the massive value I had created for Omnicore over a decade. The attached non-disclosure agreement was a legal muzzle designed to bury the truth forever and protect Julian's unearned reputation. I looked at the text message on my screen. I didn't get angry. I didn't type a furious, emotional reply. Anger is an emotion that clouds logical judgment, and right now, I needed absolute clarity. I simply smiled, hit the delete button, and threw my phone onto the wooden desk. I refused to respond at all. Julian's massive arrogance had completely blinded him. He was so convinced of his own corporate power that he failed to see the legal and operational minefield he was walking straight into. He thought my silence meant I was defeated and afraid. He had no idea that I was just waiting for the clock to run down. The trap was now perfectly set, and Julian had just pulled the lever himself. With exactly 24 hours left before the formal, high-stakes contract signing ceremony with Titan Retail, it was time to pull the trigger. The corporate world moves entirely on documentation, and I was about to deliver a document that would completely shatter Julian's entire reality. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I sat down at my laptop and drafted a highly precise, formal email. I addressed it directly to Omnicore's board of directors and the chief compliance officer. But the most important move was the blind carbon copy. I secretly BCC'd the chief legal counsel of Titan Retail, a man named Arthur Pendleton, whose private contact information I had saved during our initial technical audit phase weeks ago. I kept the language simple, cold, and professional. I wrote, "Dear members of the board and compliance committee, this email serves as formal notification that Omnicore Systems is currently in material breach of the proprietary software lease agreement signed on March 14, 2016. Due to my unlawful removal from my executive duties and the unauthorized restriction of my administrative access by CEO Julian Ross, the lease for the OmniRoute data protocol is officially terminated, effective immediately. Omnicore Systems no longer holds any legal right, license, or authorization to utilize, run, or market this technology. I hereby grant the company 24 hours to cease and desist all usage of my patented intellectual property. Continued operation of the platform past this deadline will result in immediate federal copyright infringement litigation." I attached the original lease agreements, my patent registration forms, and the hidden IT server logs showing Julian's explicit command to sabotage my access. I took a deep breath, hovered my cursor over the button, and clicked send. The response was instantaneous. Across town, at the Omnicore headquarters, total chaos erupted. Within 10 minutes, my phone began ringing off the hook. The board members were calling. The chief compliance officer was calling. Julian called me 7 times in a row, his name flashing mockingly on the screen. I did not answer a single call. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. According to a close friend of mine who was still working inside the executive building, Julian went completely pale when the board chairman stormed into his office and forwarded him my email. Realizing the massive danger to his reputation and his multi-million-dollar bonus, Julian immediately tried to cover up the crisis. He refused to admit defeat. Instead, he stormed down to the main server room, called a panicked emergency meeting with the remaining senior engineering team, and demanded an immediate workaround. I don't care what Vance claims in his emails. Julian shouted, his polished corporate mask completely slipping in front of the technical staff. "He is just an employee. We own this company, and we own this building. I want you to go into the system right now, bypass his protocols, and remove his name from the architecture. Clone the routing system if you have to. Just make sure that platform runs tomorrow night for the Titan signing ceremony." But Julian's complete lack of technical knowledge finally caught up with him. The lead engineer, a man I had personally trained for 5 years, looked at Julian with an expression of pure dread. "We cannot do that, Julian," the engineer explained, his voice shaking under the pressure. "The entire enterprise core is hard-coded around Marcus's personal cryptographic encryption keys. The security tokens rotate automatically, and they require his unique biometric signature and master password to renew. If we try to force a bypass or copy the code, the system will look at it as a massive hostile cyber attack. The entire network will instantly enter a secure, global lockdown mode. Every single client transaction will freeze, and our entire database will be corrupted. It would take months to rebuild this system from scratch, and we would lose every single byte of live data we have." Julian stared at the engineers in absolute horror. For the first time in his corporate career, his expensive suit, his elite degree, and his empty buzzwords could not save him. He was completely helpless, trapped inside a technical reality he didn't understand, watching the clock tick down to his own public destruction. The next afternoon, with exactly 2 hours left before the Titan retail contract was scheduled to expire forever, my laptop screen lit up. An urgent, mandatory calendar invitation appeared. It was for an emergency video conference link, labeled simply, "Urgent Review, Vance Intellectual Property Claim." I clicked the link and joined the call from the quiet comfort of my home office. The digital boardroom was an absolute war zone. The grid of faces on my monitor showed total panic. All 12 members of the Omnicore Board of Directors were present, their faces pale and tense. In the corner of the screen sat Arthur Pendleton, the chief legal counsel for Titan Retail, along with 3 of his top corporate attorneys. And right in the middle of the grid was Julian Ross. The transformation in Julian was incredible. The polished, confident executive from the gala was completely gone. His expensive hair was messy, his tie was loosened, and he was sweating so profusely that his forehead glistened under his office lights. He was breathing heavily, talking at a frantic, desperate speed to the board members before I could even open my mouth. "Members of the board, please listen to me," Julian stammered, his voice cracking with anxiety. "This is completely ridiculous. Marcus Vance is just a disgruntled former employee who is upset because the company moved past him. This entire email is a cheap bluff. It is a pathetic attempt to shake us down for money right before our biggest corporate victory. Our legal team can throw this out of court in an hour. We must proceed with the Titan retail signing immediately." Before any board member could reply, Arthur Pendleton, the Titan retail attorney, cut in. His voice was cold, heavy, and completely furious. He did not look at Julian. He looked directly into his camera lens. "Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Julian," Arthur said, slamming his hand flat on his desk. "Titan Retail does not do business with amateurs, and we certainly do not sign $150 million contracts with companies facing immediate federal copyright litigation. Your system architecture audit explicitly claimed that Omnicore held full ownership of all core routing technologies. If Mr. Vance's claim is true, you have lied to a multinational corporation. You have committed massive corporate fraud and exposed our entire security infrastructure to an unacceptable legal risk." Julian completely lost his mind. His carefully manufactured corporate mask shattered into 1,000 pieces right there on camera. He pointed his finger directly at my video feed, his face turning an angry, deep red as he began screaming at the top of his lungs. "You are a thief, Marcus," Julian shouted, his eyes wide with rage. "You stole that code from this company. You built it while you were working here. I will sue you for every single penny you own. I will tie you up in court for the next 30 years until you are completely bankrupt and living on the street. You think you can ruin my career? You are nothing but a backroom technician, and I will destroy you." The entire boardroom went completely silent. No one moved. The board members looked at Julian with expressions of pure horror and disgust. They had never seen their polished CEO act like a cornered, unhinged animal. Throughout his entire explosive meltdown, I remained completely unbothered. I didn't yell back. I didn't argue. I didn't let my heart rate rise by a single beat. I waited for him to finish breathing heavily into his microphone, and then I spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Julian," I said softly, "you cannot sue someone for taking back what they legally own, and you cannot destroy an architect who built the walls you are standing inside." I clicked a button on my laptop and shared my screen with everyone on the call. I brought up the original corporate bylaws, zooming directly into the specific intellectual property lease addendum from 2016. I highlighted the clause stating that any restriction of my executive duties automatically terminated the software license. Then, I opened the final piece of evidence, Julian's own internal email to the IT department, ordering them to secretly neutralize me and block my administrative access before the gala. As you can see, I told the board calmly, Julian Ross explicitly ordered the company to sabotage my position. By doing so, he personally triggered the immediate expiration of the OmniRoute software lease. As of right now, OmniCore Systems is running on stolen technology. And in exactly 45 minutes, the cryptographic security tokens will expire. Without my biometric signature, the entire network will enter a permanent global lockdown. Arthur Pendleton didn't wait to hear another word. He turned to the board chairman. Titan Retail is pulling its contract off the table immediately. We are done. The only way we will ever consider signing this deal is if Julian Ross is removed permanently and Marcus Vance is placed in absolute, total control of this enterprise. The moment the words left the Titan Retail attorney's mouth, the corporate execution of Julian Ross was swift, absolute, and completely clean. The board of directors didn't even hesitate. The chairman called for an immediate, emergency vote right there on the video conference. Based on the clear documentation of gross negligence, willful misconduct, and a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty, the chairman announced, his voice trembling with anger, the board hereby votes to terminate Julian Ross from his position as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. The vote was completely unanimous. Every single board member raised their hand. Because Julian was fired for cause due to illegal corporate sabotage, a specific clause in his contract was triggered. He was completely stripped of all his unvested stock options, his massive performance bonuses, and his multi-million-dollar severance package. He was leaving the company with absolutely nothing but a ruined reputation that would follow him for the rest of his life. While Julian sat in his office, staring blankly at his computer screen in total, paralyzed shock, the chairman turned his eyes to my video feed. "Marcus," the chairman said, his tone completely changing to one of deep respect and desperation. "We apologize for the way you were treated. It was a massive mistake. By unanimous vote of the board, we want to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer of OmniCore Systems. Please, tell us what we need to do to save this company." "My terms are simple," I replied calmly. "I want full operational control. I want the predatory private equity rules rewritten to protect our engineering teams. And I want Julian Ross escorted out of the building by security immediately." "Agreed," the chairman said without a second of hesitation. With the terms finalized, Arthur Pendleton from Titan Retail smiled on camera. He pulled out a heavy fountain pen and signed the $150 million contract directly at his desk, holding it up to the camera. The deal was officially alive, secured on my terms, under my leadership. The next morning, I drove to the OmniCore Systems headquarters. As I walked through the heavy revolving glass doors, the atmosphere inside the building had completely shifted. News of the boardroom coup had spread like wildfire. The security guards who had blocked me at the hotel gala just 2 days ago stood at absolute attention, opening the doors for me with nervous, respectful looks on their faces. I walked on the main engineering floor. The hundreds of developers and junior technicians who had watched me get publicly humiliated looked up from their screens. Slowly, one by one, they stood up, The room erupted into a genuine, thunderous ovation. These were the people who actually kept the company alive, and they knew that one of their own was finally in charge. I gave them a quiet nod of respect and walked straight up to the top floor. I entered the massive executive corner office that had belonged to Julian just 24 hours earlier. The room was sleek, expensive, and completely empty. Julian had been escorted out of the building the night before by the exact same security team he had used to bar me from the gala, carrying his personal belongings in a small cardboard box. I walked over to the large desk, sat down in the leather executive chair, and looked out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows at the beautiful city skyline below. I booted up the master engineering console on the desktop monitor and logged in using my private biometric fingerprint scan. The system instantly recognized me, renewing the cryptographic security tokens and stabilizing the entire global network. I opened the administrative user directory. I scrolled down the alphabetical list until I found the name, Ross Julian. Status: active. I hover my cursor over his name, click the master override button, and hit delete. A small digital window popped up on the screen, asking if I wanted to permanently erase this user and all associated data from the corporate network. I smiled, tapped the enter key, and watched his profile disappear into nothingness. True power doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room or the most expensive suit. True power belongs to the architect who built the foundation.